Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Global Peace Film Festival, Lives Online. Tonight, we're having a conversation with Robert Frye, Director of Nuclear Requiem and In My Lifetime. He'll be joined by Renor Johnny, UN Representative for Pathways to Peace. We're going to be talking about nuclear non-proliferation and the state of that issue today. And we really look forward to hearing from you later on social media. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome, Bob and Renor. Now we're back. Now I've stopped the share. I just wanted to thank you both for joining us. Bob is a filmmaker, a former TV news producer who's produced 2 documentaries that we've had in the Global Peace Film Festival in previous years. One is In My Lifetime, the other is Nuclear Requiem. They both address the issue of nuclear disarmament, nuclear non-proliferation, and the danger of nuclear weapons. And Renor works with, and Bob's video just disappeared. Renor works with Pathways to Peace and is their UN representative, one of their UN youth representatives. And he is also actively working on disarmament issues. And we wanted to do this intergenerational discussion because it's so important that young people join the movement for nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation, which has changed so much. So Bob, tell us a little bit about your films first of all, and how this came to be such an important issue to you, and also about the nuclear world, your website.
First of all, I want to thank you, Nina and Kelly, for putting this together, but also more importantly for me, of having my films in your festival. I find that your dedication not only to this topic, but just to the overall arching reality of peace in the world is very important, and your constant presence, if you will, I feel is important. Renor, your work obviously as a member of the younger generation, I feel I want to spend most of this time talking about what you're doing. My films come from a long time interest. When I was in the Army, in 1960, it's hard for me to get that out. I ended up working on nuclear weapon planning. It's a long story, which I won't go into. And then I was a network news producer, and I produced a series on the US and the Soviet Union back in the 80s. Anyway, it evolved, my interest has evolved out of that period. And I feel these 2 films are meant to educate as well as to provide opportunities for younger generations to understand the enormity and reality of the presence of nuclear weapons. Renor, I would be very interested in hearing more about what your experience has been. I know there are a couple of folks that have joined us for this conversation. One of them is a young man that I have gotten to know, is very dedicated in this field. But I feel that it's important to hear what your experience has been and where you're coming from, why you got involved in this. If you don't mind me asking, Nina.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bob. That was a perfect way to start to introduce you, Renor.
With your audio, please.
Oh, yes, Renor, there you
go. There we go. Well, first, Nina, I want to thank you for bringing us all together and bridging, kind of being the community gatherer, I should say, of all different generations together, because a conversation can naturally be intergenerational if there isn't a diversity of generations here present. So first, I have to thank you for that. And Bob, I also thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself and your experience, because it is very much valid and important for people, my generation and younger generations, to hear and to learn from. And so, first, how did I get involved in this? Who am I? What do I do? Well, I'm currently a student studying international relations. And I've been a UN representative for Pathways to Peace for the past 2 years. How I got into disarmament work and what do I do? Most of my efforts within disarmament are focused on the intergenerational aspect. As I was saying to Nina a few minutes ago, the climate movement has been able to gain so much momentum because the younger generation has amplified the voice of so many scientists, of so many indigenous communities, and so many people who have been screaming at the top of their lungs about the catastrophes that are happening and the real dangers that our planet is facing. And that has happened, through the climate strikes, through more young people actually lending their voice, their energy, their ambition to this. And so with the disarmament work, right now I'm organizing a conference that is in concert with the International Day of the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. And this conference will be centered around the intergenerational approach to advancing disarmament and the TPNW, which is a treaty of the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I do very much believe that we, as a whole, not just young people or younger people, but as a whole, we do need to have less fear and be more bold and courageous in terms of disarmament. And I think that I personally think back to the Hibakusha and how they have dedicated all of their lives to coming to a point where we finally have a treaty that is legally binding and that bans nuclear weapons in every country that signs and ratifies it. And so there is definitely a divide in terms of methods, techniques, and approaches to this. But ultimately, we're all trying to reach one goal. And I believe we have to now be more courageous and bold in our stance. So that's just a little bit about what I'm doing today.
What is your greatest frustration in trying to explain that to your fellow generation members, why this is so important?
I wouldn't say it's so much of a frustration. I would say
Challenge.
that it's a little saddening, I would say, for me, to see and to have a conversation with my peers and to see just how little they may understand about this. And I can't say that it's their fault. I think that nuclear weapons, the topic of nuclear weapons and the operations behind it on a national level, it's something that's very privatized. It's something that's very, it's not something that's just out in the open. It's just like the internet. You're plugged into the internet when you're on an electronic device. But once you're off that device, you ask, where is it? Where is it? And so the same thing with nuclear weapons, there's a presence about it, but because you don't see it like you would see a plane flying in the sky, there is this kind of mysteriousness to it, this mysterious nature, mist, I should say, that envelopes it. And so because of that, it's very hard for people to, especially people of my generation, to kind of put things together and to kind of envision that. This is why I think it's so important to have an intergenerational approach, and especially to learn from the Hibakusha, because they themselves have survived a catastrophe like this. And I will quote the executive director of ICANN, Beatrice Finn, who said during one of the commemoration ceremonies in Japan, she said to the Hibakusha that you are the true experts on disarmament. And so for them who have lived through it, we have to be willing to hear from them. And we also have, that will require some of us to look beyond our own borders. So it's less of a frustration, but it's more of giving them a chance to first kind of absorb in their awareness and their consciousness that this is something that does exist, and that there's a silent fear and possibility that it can cause catastrophes beyond what we can even imagine.
And are you able to bring disarmament issues to youth climate activists, and how is that working? And have you been able to introduce, and let's just define Hibakusha if anybody watching does not know, they are the Japanese atomic bomb survivors. So they are also getting pretty old, and they're just incredible activists and passionate about making the world aware of the terrors of nuclear weapons. But are you able to bring the importance of nuclear weapons to the youth activists on climate issues, and what are their responses when you bring it up?
Well, they are most definitely related and interconnected with one another. If you take note of the dome that contains nuclear waste in the Marshall Islands, and that the dome is like it's currently leaking right now, and so that is something that can create a lot of catastrophe in the ocean and within the Marshall Islands itself, and also with those who have experienced many biological issues and problems because of nuclear testing and the radiation that spreads in that region. They are most definitely interrelated. What I have been seeing is a lot of the cross-sharing, I should say, or the hand-in-hand cooperation between environmental groups and disarmament groups. It hasn't been as prevalent as it is now, but it is something that's growing in this field, and it is something that we have to integrate together because they are interrelated, they are connected, and especially since a lot of the nuclear weapons are not always stored on land. They are stored in submarines and in boats in water. So, for example, if that boat is damaged or something happens to that boat, we have to think of what are the implications and the causes of that can happen in the ocean as a result.
And in terms of your activism, Renor, are you also involved with nuclear power, or are you specifically focused on nuclear weapons?
As of now, I'm focusing solely on the abolition and disarmament of nuclear weapons. I do feel like there is an urgency. I haven't looked too much into nuclear power, but right now I'm focusing on disarmament. In the Secretary General's agenda for disarmament, he pretty much stated and recognized youth as the ultimate force of change. And so I don't want to take anything for granted. I don't want to take this moment of my life for granted, especially when we're on this precipice at any moment. And I don't say that with a sense of fear. I actually say that with a sense of enthusiasm and motivation. So I think it's important for everyone, regardless of what stage of life you're in, to not slip into this fear, because the fear can be very paralyzing, and that eats away at your willpower to make a difference. It's just a matter of having more of these dialogues and cooperative efforts, so that we can help the general public better understand how to get involved, how to get, to further interact, how to further contribute to this movement.
So that's my next question to both of you, actually, is what can people watching this do? What do you encourage people to do? And I want to ask Bob first what he would say, and then follow up with you, Renor.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, Nora, I'm very encouraged by your activism, because it is essential that your generation pick up on this. This is not something, I mean, Nina and I can experience, and Kelly as well, but Nina as well was in Central Park in the early 80s when activism was at its height, with the demonstration of, at the time, of the height of the Cold War, really. And it's very important to understand, I mean, strontium-90 is in my bones. I was born actually during the time of the beginning of the nuclear age. And, we had on live television in the early 60s, nuclear explosions shown live on television, because the point was we were being acculturated in the United States to the reality of presence of nuclear weapons. And you cited the idea that it's now silent. Well, in those days, it wasn't. And I think it's important that you and others bring this to life in ways, as you've mentioned, also the Abakashaw, continue to tell the story. But as Nina just said, they're not going to be with us much longer. And to carry that message forward, I think, is very important, because, as you've also said, it's present. One point I'd like to make about nuclear power, as you fully understand, without nuclear power, there wouldn't be nuclear weapons. And so there's a convergence between the two. The plants that were built in the state of Washington and in Tennessee were to produce the material, the weapons material, the plutonium and the uranium to make the bombs. Without them, the bombs wouldn't exist. But I think it's important, the conversations like this one, it doesn't make, to me, it's not about numbers. I mean, I've had two films, both of them have been shown on television in the United States as well as internationally with screenings, like at the Global Peace Film Festival. It's more important that you have people that get it and are committed to the idea of carrying the message forth. And my goal really is to see that happen. I have on the wall in my office, don't be pessimistic, but to be optimistic means you're engaged. And I feel you're an optimistic person, as I feel I am, and Nina and Kelly, by the work they do in allowing the films to be shown. So my message to you is keep up the work.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
And Renor, what would you tell people to do, young and old?
First, Bob, I have to thank you for recognizing the optimism and the enthusiasm. And you're right. You're definitely right when you say that it's important to have people who have an understanding of this, and who understand the importance of this. And what I would say to young people of all generations, of all pathways, and to world leaders, those in government, I first would say that there is an importance to understand the TPNW, because the TPNW is a legally binding treaty that allows for countries to, it gives a framework, it gives an opening, a field of opening that can guide and keep and maintain the disarmament of nuclear weapons in each country. I think it's important.
Can you tell us how many countries have so far signed the TPNW?
I was just about to get into that. In order for the TPNW to go in entry into force, which would mean it would become international law, there's a requirement of at least 50 countries. Right now, we're at 44. Most recently, during the Hiroshima and Nagasaki commemorative ceremonies, Nigeria, Ireland, Nauru, and St. Kitts and Nevis had signed and ratified the treaty, and they have officially banned nuclear weapons in their countries. Africa is actually a nuclear weapon-free zone under the Treaty of Pelindaba, and there are actually a few nuclear weapon-free zones throughout the world. But first, I would say to educate yourself about the TPNW, to educate yourself about the disarmament in general as best as you can, and to speak with those who are in the field, those who are experts, those who are other advocates and activists such as ICANN, such as the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, to first better understand it. And that's what I did at first. I reached out to a few organizations to first better understand what's going on. And I would also say that it's very, very important to start to not just think on the global level, but also on the local level, because we need to understand that with nuclear weapons, financing has a big part in it. As it's a major source of fuel that keeps these weapons on the face of our earth. And you may never know that your local city council, your local government could be financing it or funding it. So divestment is also very important in being able to eradicate these weapons. So contacting your local council member or assemblywoman or assemblyman, or your local congressman or congresswoman, and helping them understand that, you know, we need their support. And one of the ways in which they can support is by signing the ICANN pledge, which is a parliamentarian pledge in which elected officials, congresswomen, congressmen can sign to officially state their support for nuclear disarmament. And, you know, whether it leads to a shift in policy or not, we have to understand that it's important for our voices to be unified in this. From all different sectors, from all different generations, from all different pathways.
Thank you. That's really important. Bob, did you want to
Yeah,
jump
I
in?
just wanted to follow up on what you just said. There, of course, is Mayors for Peace, which is an organization, and many cities and towns in the United States belong to Mayors for Peace, and the folks that are listening might want to inquire as to whether their city happens to be one of those that are involved. A plug for the website, thenuclearworld.org. If you go to the connection portal that's on the site, there are several organizations that I've contacted over the years who are part of the connection portal. So there's plenty of opportunity for anyone listening or watching to go there, find an organization, not only in the United States, but worldwide. There are more people out there actively involved in this topic than you think there are. And so often it seems like a lonely pursuit, but it really isn't. It takes one to change the world. And we certainly saw that with the development of the nuclear bomb. And I think Venora is one of the younger generation activists, you're a very good example of what it takes to get the work done.
So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask Renor to say a little bit more generally tell us about Pathways to Peace before we wrap up, because that's the organization that you represent.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Nina. Pathways to Peace is a UN peace messenger organization. One of our founders, Avon Madison and David Wick, they are the co-founders of the International Day of Peace at the UN, and they also are co-founders of the Global Movement of the Culture of Peace. And Pathways to Peace is a peace-building organization that focuses on peace and security issues. And we have different initiatives in which we work through to further develop a global movement and a global culture of peace. That's really what we are all moving towards. And so, since we are a UN Peace Messenger organization, we have a whole team of UN representatives who all have their own unique talents and abilities in co-creating a culture of peace. At the moment, so I come from Albanian descent. I'm a first-generation American, and I am Albanian, but my parents were born in a country that you may remember named Yugoslavia, which no longer exists. But I think coming from being raised and coming from a culture that has experienced a lot of war and a lot of tragedy, especially with the genocide happening in the 90s, has led me to learn how weapons of all sorts create so much catastrophe, and with the genocide ending because of the US pressuring NATO to drop a bomb on Serbia, led me to think, man, I wonder how we could have peacefully resolved that. I wonder how we could have approached it in a different way without having to drop a bomb on a country to stop something like this. This is what was going on in my mind, you know, that we had to resort to a bomb. Maybe not, it was not an atomic bomb, a nuclear bomb, but it was a bomb. And I don't think that we need to resort to such barbaric approaches to reach peace anymore. I think we need to start turning away from such barbaric practices and peace building, more into peace building, less into such approaches.
Thank you. And Bob, do you have any final words?
Thank you. Number one. Two, Renor, keep up the good work because it's over to your generation. God bless, and because it's going to be very essential for the world ahead that you folks pick up the mantle and continue the search for ways to build peace. And certainly, Nina and Kelly, the work you do helps encourage filmmakers like myself to continue to do films that relate to the topic of peace. They're like seeds, I think, around the world, because there are plenty of folks out there that are receptive to the message, may not even know that there are possibilities on that order to make that happen. And certainly all the work that's being done at the UN, of which you're a part of, is essential for our world moving forward. Thank you.
And thank you, both Bob and Renor. And you can check out Bob's work at thenuclearworld.org. And you can check out Renor's work at pathwaystopeace.org. And stay tuned for the next Glow, and also stay tuned for the Global Peace Film Festival that will run from September 21st, which is, of course, the International Day of Peace. It will run through October 4th. And check out our website. There will be information and tickets available. The festival will be primarily virtual this year. And we hope everybody watching will tell everybody they know to check out the films and watch some of them and share the information with their friends. So with that, again, thank you, Renor. Thank you, Bob, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.